Welcome to the A&A Podcast, where we discuss topics of interest to our audience. We are your hosts.
I am Alexander.
And I am Antonio.
And we have today a very special guest.
He is a Redemptorist. He joined the Redemptorists in the later 70s. He was ordained in 1981, graduated from School of Divinity in Melbourne University with a postgrad studies in psychology. He worked as missionary in Samoa and then chaplain for the Samoan migrant community in New Zealand. He was ordained Bishop of American Samoa in 2013. Welcome, Bishop Peter Brown.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and also to Alex. It's a great opportunity to be with you through this podcast. I hope that through our conversation we might be able to share with one another the important parts of our discussion tonight. So it's great to be here, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. And we have a very interesting topic today. Alexander, can you tell us a little bit about what we're talking today?
Yes, we are going to talk about virtue and different perspective and the theology that it comes with this word. And we were talking about the last 2 weeks about the moral agent and how our actions can be judged. And we know that we use the object, the intention, and the circumstances to help us to understand why the actions can be good or can be bad. And based on that, then we can see that in the practice of these actions, somebody can be judged such as a virtue person or the opposite. So that's why we are going to go into this topic, and I hope that Antonio can explain a little bit about the concept of virtue.
Right. In a very general term, virtue can be defined as a good habit that inclines a person to act well, both externally and intentionally. And a virtuous person essentially performs good acts, it's always, these acts come spontaneously. So the person doesn't have to think too much about it, because his virtue is something that becomes sort of like a good habit, essentially. The opposite of a virtue then is a vice, which is a bad habit that inclines the person toward morally bad actions. And again, just like the virtue is something that just comes naturally. The person doesn't have to think too much about it or say, I'm going to do something bad. It just comes naturally because the person is used to doing this. And I think this conception of it, in our world, we always talk about being a good person, being a bad person, and maybe without even realizing it, we consider people to be virtuous or not virtuous. Don't you think?
Yes, you just say that have these two kind of dimensions, right? The internal one and the external one, because we are going to see how, when we used to say many times, oh, this person is virtuous. So it's a very deeper concept, because we need to use our two capacities, our knowledge and our freedom, in order to make these actions. And just for remember, we have to choose between our freedom that is based on the difference and the freedom that is based for the excellence, because we are making choices many times and every day. But by what we feel, what we think, what we understand, we can say, okay, I will choose this option just because I have to choose something. But at the same time, there are some decisions in our life that we have to say no. We have to apply for something bigger. What do you think, Bishop Peter Brown, about that?
Yes, I think for the sake of our discussion in our podcast, I'm presuming that we're referring to virtues as lived by Christians, which can lead us into good lives, as what you're talking about, as opposed to vices, which we can equally develop as much as we can in good virtues. And, they can have the opposite effect of what it means to be a moral person. I think also we have to recognize that as Christians, we don't have the sole claim to be the only people on earth who live virtuous lives. I was thinking today, like people like Bill Gates, who in his life, I think he contributes something like $75 billion for the sake of humanity. As opposed when we talk about virtues, we are sort of looking at more in terms of not for a philanthropic as a philanthropist as he would, but really that we look in virtues in terms of seeking union with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's good also to keep that in perspective. There are many people in the world who live virtuous lives. What we are the track that we are taking is that yes, we live virtuous lives because as moral people we are looking for union with God. So I think that's the point that that I would like to make.
Yeah, I think you make a very interesting point, and looking at it from the Christian perspective, that is aiming towards a closer union with God. And I remember this made me think of a story many years ago. When I was first starting to study philosophy, I had a little bit of conflict with liking Thomas Aquinas because his writings were very difficult for me. But I remember there was this other friend of mine, a seminarian, who really enjoyed reading about Thomas Aquinas. And I said, because he was saying, well, he's a saint in the church and doctor of the church. And I said, so why is he a saint? Because all I knew about him was his philosophy. And I found it incredibly frustrating. And I said, is it because of what he wrote? And my friend looked at me kind of puzzled, and he said, no, he's a saint because he lived a virtuous life, not because of what he wrote. And when he said that, it really made me stop and reconsider what I thought of holiness or of a saint. That then I can understand that when I look at a saint, it's that he lived a virtuous life, and in the sense that you're talking about this, Bishop Brown, that it is seeking a closer union with God rather than just being a philanthropist, as you were saying. And that goes very much in line with some of the things that we were talking about, or we were reading in preparation for this podcast, because one of our authors was talking about how virtue has had different sort of meanings throughout different eras. And the challenge that he finds is that, saying, well, if at one point in history virtue was meant something, how can we apply it today? Or is virtue something just abstract that we get to decide what it means, or it means whatever we want? Is it something arbitrary? And so the first example that he gives is that Homer, for example, defines virtues as being tied to fulfillment on a specific social role. It has to do with a quality that enables an individual to do functions well in society. So, for example, he would say that a warrior has to be courageous and has to be loyal, and so that would make him a virtuous person. But then, in the context of Aristotle, virtue is a sort of excellence that enables the human person to move towards a purpose, right? But then Aristotle would say that only essentially people who had the means could be virtuous people. So poor people or women didn't necessarily have a capacity to be virtuous because they couldn't cultivate these virtues, according to what Aristotle said. And so he uses honor, for example, as a virtue, temperance, courage, justice, or even pride as something being virtuous. But then when we look at the New Testament, we see a different light of virtues. And we see virtues like faith, hope, love, charity. And so even in the New Testament, we see how pride, which is a virtue in the eyes of Aristotle, is considered something not very virtuous in the gospel or in the New Testament, that it's seen as the root of sin, to be prideful, right? And then even further down, we see, like in the United States, for example, Benjamin Franklin looks at virtues as a means to an end. So something that I do that helps me to attain happiness. And so it's completely different to the view of the gospel, or even with the way that Homer or Aristotle saw it. And so this is why one of our authors, McIntyre is his name, was kind of saying, what do we mean by virtue? is there something that we can look at and say this is virtue that can apply to everyone based on all of these different perspectives?
Yeah.
I'm very glad that you brought this topic, Antonio, because we have the sensation that actually everybody have a truth about when they want to speak something, especially when we mention virtue, because we can see how during these different periods of the time, philosophers say something, then theologians say another thing, and other people from our era say another perspective, and there is kind of fighting between each of these characters. So how can we see this development to work together? Because for me it sounds like something of relativism, no? Like for the beginning of the times, virtue was focused just in the social role in the society, and then the other philosophers say no, it's more about the human being. It's what is his achievement. And then we have the Bible perspective, when we found in the New Testament how virtues are considered. So how can you think we can link together all these different perspectives and don't say no? Each era have their reasons, and now we don't know what is exactly virtue.
I think for me, what we're talking about, what I have found very helpful in my own personal life, when we're trying to look at, say the call to us all is to live a holy life, and therefore how can we live a holy life? The mystics would tell us one way in which you can attain something of a holy life is to use these virtues that create habitual behavior. That in that way they are a means by which you are able to have this union with God. It was interesting in thinking about today in virtues. I noticed that the feast of Saint Teresa of Avila is not too far away, and if we look at her and her life, I think she's very, very. Personally, I find her very helpful in understanding this whole idea of what is the purpose of virtues, and why are they presented to us as something important, for us to be able to have this union with God. Because when you come down to the most basic principle what is the purpose of living a moral life? It is the foundation stone of living a moral life is that we would have union with God. And I think Saint Teresa is I personally find her a great help in terms of connecting the meaning of virtue or virtues and what meaning they have for us in our own moral lives. When you look at her life, she's the doctor of prayer, and so therefore we look at her as she is one of the most important people in the history of the church who was able to deeply understand what it means to have that union with God. And she says that virtues are a key factor in the way in which we are able to achieve this unity in God. It's interesting, in her life, she was a Carmelite. She lived in an enclosed life. Her own sisters in her own community could see that she achieved a deep sense of being able to live in union with God. And so they asked her, please teach us. And so there she wrote the book that we are so familiar with, in which she describes the different stages of this ability to be able to be in touch with unity with God, like the stages of levels of spirituality. Interior Castles was the book that she wrote. The 7 stages, which she calls mansions. I think it is in that sense that she had a sense of in the beginning of this journey of deepening our awareness of our presence in the union of God. She talks as that initial awareness is a grace. And there's a commentator by the name of James Finlay who talks a lot on Saint Teresa, and he uses the example. If you can imagine, you buy this beautiful house, and it's a 2-story house, and the bottom floor is surrounded by glass, and you go up to the house and you can see the beautiful kitchen, the beautiful lounge, the marble outlay of the different parts of the house, but you don't have the keys to get in. She says, this is our initial stage of we are aware. The gift from God is that we are aware that we are aware of the presence of God in our life, which he calls the soul. But in the initial stages, we are unable to truly access the presence of God because we don't have the keys to get there. And so therefore she uses the idea of virtue. When you habitually have these virtues in your life, that enables you to become closer to the awareness of God.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes. I think
it's not a theory. It's not something that that we theorize about virtue. But she was actually bring it down and say, when you live these virtues in your life, it enables you to deepen your awareness of what it means to be in union with God.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very good and very true as well. One of the authors that we were looking at kind of talks about what you're doing, but puts it in a contrast of attaining something through these virtues, through being a virtuous person, right? And so he puts, there's an external good and there's an internal good. And the way he defines it says, okay, when you do something good, when you're good at something, and we'll use the example of Saint Teresa of Avila. She was a Carmelite nun and she was close to God, and people could see that she was a prayerful woman. Probably they saw perhaps reverence, they saw her praying constantly, they saw that she had a sort of relationship with God. So that's an external good, that people saw that she was doing these good things. But then there was an internal good, which is what you were describing as she saw the benefit of that was to get closer to God, that she found something that made doing all of these things worth it. So it wasn't that she did it so that the sisters came and asked her, hey, can you teach us how to pray? She was going to do that regardless of whether people noticed or they didn't notice. And that's the difference, is that being a virtuous person, it's not about attaining the external goods or people saying, wow, look at how good you are with this. Because then the minute that you don't get that recognition from people, or that you find easier ways to get it, then you won't be practicing these virtues. But if you find a reason why to do these things, which in the case of the Christian life is to get closer to God, to have a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God, then it doesn't matter whether people notice or don't notice. You could be in a deserted island and you would still be driven to live a virtuous life, because your ultimate goal is to get closer to God.
I just, the other person obviously that you and I are close to is Saint Alphonsus.
Yes.
And when you were talking there, I was just looking at a moral virtue in terms of Saint Alphonsus was the habitual disposition to do good. Habitual disposition to do good. This word habitual I noticed that it comes up a lot when we look at mystics, the lives of the mystics. And I wonder, could you just share with the both of you, when you hear something like that, like when Teresa says, she wants to be in a place where she's habitually aware of the presence of God. And this St. Alphonse is saying a virtue is an habitual disposition to do good. I wonder, what both of you how would you interpret that idea of habitualness in that context? I'd be interested to know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow me, Bishop, I just came to my mind one of the words of St. Augustine, because you were right when you say all these mystic that we have in the church, they use different metaphors in order to explain what is the virtue. And like Santa Teresa, Augustine in his book on the morals of the Catholic Church, he said that the cardinal virtues are based just on the love of God. Always pointing that through the love, we can be a prudent people, a just person. We can get the fortitude that we need for our life and this temperance that we need. Because, of course, each of them cover all the actions of the human being. But just in the cardinal virtues, they say all of them are inside. So it's just by the love or by the grace of God that we can be or we can become a virtue person. It's like when Santa Teresa said that we need these stages in order to get this our desired kind of life. The same is in St. Augustine, that he say it's just by the love. We have to work in these four cardinal virtues, but it's just by the love that we can get this. How he say, no, my soul rests in you when I can find you. So I'm very ashamed how all these people, maybe not in different ways, but with the same perspective, they got the same idea, right?
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of what Alex was sharing, when you were talking about the habitual part of it, what does Saint Teresa, what does Saint Alphonse mean when they talk about this? They use the adjective habitual. I think the best way to describe it would be that it is a natural thing, that it just happens, sort of like almost like breathing, that they don't have to think about how is God present in this moment. It's an awareness. You just say God is present in this moment. You're able to realize how God is present in a moment. You're probably just inspired to maybe say a prayer or to recognize the presence of God without having to stop and think about it. You just say it. Like sometimes when if you're driving down the road and I don't know, someone cuts up in front of you, you just say Jesus, it's something to that effect, but it just comes so naturally.
Yeah, I think I use the example of what's an habitual thing that we do. When you tie your shoelaces up in the morning, you don't in your mind you're left over right, right over left, left over right. No, you just do it habitually. You unconsciously do that activity without actually thinking about what you're doing. And I think that's what she means. When you are habitually in the presence of God, as opposed to when do we pray? You go into the chapel to pray, or you stop and pray, and put yourself in the presence of God. But what she means, no, you don't put the presence of God in some sort of compartment in your day. That really habitually to be in the presence of God is that you're never away from the presence. Whatever you are doing during your day, you are always in the presence of God. And I don't know about you guys, but I think for me that's probably level 7. I haven't got there yet.
And perhaps one of the things that we can say, as we talk about these virtues and living a virtuous life in the Christian sense, I think we should make a point to say that the virtues that we receive from the Holy Spirit, as a gift of the Holy Spirit, as a gift of the fruits of a prayerful life or relationship with God, somehow are also building on more basic virtues that are considered human virtues, like prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, this type of virtues that I think are essential that a person has in order for these virtues that bring us even closer to God can take root. Don't you think? Like to be able to develop faith, hope, and love, there should be a ground already for it.
I think that it's good to keep in mind that they are a means to an end.
Yes.
If they bring about a deeper union with God, but for what? And, as the mystics will tell us, that it is based on the primary commandment to love God and to love your neighbor. You're not entering a deeper relationship with God in order to sanctify only yourself. There is that other dimension, to become holy in order to not only love God, your relationship with God, but also to love your neighbor. There's always that secondary movement beyond your own intense feeling with a relationship with God, but it must be in relation to your neighbor. I think that's very important to add. So virtues, in that sense, enable us to deepen our relationship and our union with God. For what? To love God and to love neighbor. I think that second part is important.
Yes, and I would like to remark this condition that Antonio just mentioned about naturality when we make something virtue, or this when we make our actions in a spontaneous way, because imagine just a person that found another one to ask him money. He can react just by the thought that maybe there is somebody that is looking me and I have to do it just because I want to be a good person. But that's not exactly what as a virtuous person is. There are, like we say at the beginning, have these two both dimensions, the internal part and the external one. We have to, when we are practicing our actions in good way, these actions will come in natural way. We don't need to think a lot. We don't need to prepare ourselves in order to act in virtuous way. This will come naturally. And this is what is just held by the grace of God. Even if we put our best effort, we have to be aware that without the grace of God, we cannot make many things. And that's why we have the gift of the Holy Spirit and the fruit of the Holy Spirit that help us to work in this virtuous life. It's not just our efforts that we can make. Of course, we have to work very hard in order to get this holy life. But we have to be aware that without the grace of God, we cannot do as much as we expect.
Yeah. And in that sense, Saint Teresa puts the highest virtue that she makes as a foundation virtue for all the other virtues is humility. You can't be in the presence of God unless you have that deep sense of humility, exactly what you're talking about. Apart from the grace of God, how possibly could you have union with God? It's a gift of faith to be able to have that union with God. And so it's a personal act of humility in order to be able to, to appreciate that awareness of the union with God.
Correct. Yes, thank you so much for those insights. I think they're very, very important. And I think one question that we can leave for the people listening at home to our podcast as we meditate on virtues and we talked extensively about virtues is when you do good actions, when you do things in your life, and we obviously realize that there are good things that come out of it, things that we realize within ourselves that nobody else can notice, and things that people can notice. And so what are the motives in our lives? What are the things that move you to do these good things? Is it the recognition of people, or is it the inner desire to get closer to God? And I think it's something that all of us could probably meditate on and think about for the rest of our week. But I think this is a good place to end our podcast. Bishop, we want to thank you very much for your time and your availability to join us in this podcast, and hopefully there's another opportunity to do something like this again.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we could go for another hour.
Yes.
It's an interesting topic. Because we're all of us are on that journey to try and have some sort of deepening of our union with God. And the way we've talked and shared tonight about using virtues as a means to get there has been very, very important. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you. I pray that I heard from your moral theologian today that he's very inspired by the way you guys are using a podcast to develop your ideas. And so I congratulate you on your efforts. Well done.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you guys on the next time. We are your hosts. I am
Alexander.
And I am Antonio. See you next time.
God bless.
See you. Take care.
Bye-bye.